The first task is to secure the liberation forces to lead this transition. And therefore, we need to secure the ANC president as the president of the republic. This affirmation was within the framework of the alliance. It didn't matter our own opinions about this president, but we said he's the president of the ANC, and therefore he must lead the setup of government. And we said that's the strategic task of the National Democratic Revolutionary Forces. And this is the message when we met as the Alliance Secretariat, we explained as the South African Communist Party. I'm raising this because this matter was taken to the public to mean the SACP endorsed the GNU, particularly when ANC structures were addressed in this regard. We did not endorse the GNU. I'll talk at length about this GNU entity. We further said, comrades, to secure this, given that we are below 50%, we're actually at 40+%. We need to put forces that will make us cross the 50+1 and possibly few others to make sure that we are able to elect our president and continue the mission of the National Democratic Revolution. This was our view and our opinion. We said, let me explain it to you because I'm accountable largely to you first, before I account society. We said, we have permutations of a minority government that the ANC can set up to lead this transition. This minority government, we said, we developed a framework. The framework said, no with neoliberal forces headed by the DA on the one hand, and no with state capture forces headed by the MK party on the other hand. So we put these two assertions. This is the official position of the Communist Party. This position has not changed. Nonetheless, having said that, this was the framework. That was the basis why we said we can work with the EFF. We're not the spokesperson of the EFF. We said we can work with them, we can work with the PAC, with Al-Jama, with Good Party, with UDM, we'll cross the 50%. But we said, given the instability in the African National Congress, our ally, when your ally says this, they are not saying it out of wickedness. They are saying it out of concern. Given those challenges, we said in the event some sleepers in the African National Congress may not vote for the sitting president of the ANC, you may still work with the PA, a party we have no relation with, a party that we differ ideologically with. But we said this only that we can secure this moment under the leadership of the African National Congress. We have now been vilified as the people who are working for Jacob Zuma. In our case, from the beginning, even before the ANC articulated this thing clearly, we were the first to say what former President Zuma has done by setting up a party and even calling it Umkhonto weSizwe Party was a counter-revolutionary move. And we rejected that with the contempt that it deserved. We said so. We have equally said that was an expression of a counter-revolutionary offensive from within the liberation forces. But the counter-revolutionary offensive that was big was from outside, inside South Africa by forces of capital and their links of international capital. These are forces that sought to remove the democratic movement and the liberation movement from political power. Here at home, their political expression is through the DA. That is why, in principle, we rejected any relationship with the DA. This, comrade, remains our principled, in fact, our policy and our principled rejection of colluding with capital in this regard through the DA. The media, and we raised this thing yesterday with the press briefing with the media, but I'm accountable to you. I need to talk to you now. We said this to the media because they make assumptions about us without even verifying facts from us. Despite many a times reasserting this, they keep saying, Sunday Times comes out and say, you have agreed to work with the MK party. The SACP is supporting MK party. We said it's not true. Please correct that. They said they'll correct it in the next edition. They don't correct it in the next printed edition, but they corrected it in the digital edition, which, for instance, I don't even read. I don't have access to it. I don't see it. I complained to our national spokesperson, Dr. Mashil, hey, Comrade Mashil, this thing didn't appear. He said, no, the editor said, no, they did it in the digital edition. I said, let me see it. It doesn't come. The following Sunday, they repeat the same thing. I get a call from one of our comrades in KZN. He says, no, Paila, but please, almost like crying. Why is the SACP endorsing this man? I said, what do you mean? He says, no, you keep, I say the Sunday Times. I call Mashil. Mashil, these people have repeated this. I go and buy it, I find it again. We correct them. They say they corrected it again in the digital edition. Then when we expose this thing in public, then, because I did an interview with another media house in their podcast, and then I revealed this fact because they were also trying to say, are you with MK party? When I said that weekend, then Sunday Times, instead of apologizing, they say, Mapaila Mampara of the week. Because he no longer has class prism. He has a nationalistic prism. He's only talking about the unity of black parties. What is wrong with black organizations and black people uniting? There's nothing wrong principally with that. The issue is when there's narrow nationalism that is racist, we will object to that. But we can't object to the unity of the African people. That's one of our founding tasks of the movement, to unite the African people to fight for their land, in particular, to fight against the land dispossession. We will talk about this question of the land, by the way, in the report later on. So it is in this regard, comrades, that then later on, there was a criticism in public, which we know they concocted even some of this criticism, particularly in the social media space, from a consequence of a conference in Gdansk in Poland, a conference convened by the European Union, together with the Brandt's Foundation. And the Brandt's Foundation is the foundation of the Oppenheimers. This Brandt's Foundation brought there 50 African leaders to the meeting in Gdansk. In that meeting, they brought some editors from South Africa. I don't have to mention their names, but those editors were predominant commentators in the recent elections on television and radio, condemning the liberation movement. But what worried us was that among the forces that they pulled together to that meeting in Gdansk were the leader of Renamo in Mozambique, the leader of UNITA in Angola, and other opposition parties in Zimbabwe and so forth, including Tendai Biti, who came here after that in a seminar organized by the Mail and Guardian to condemn the liberation movement. And I'm now told the reason he's doing that is because he's actually publishing a book against the liberation movement. And even his condemnation of the liberation movement was a big, the whole day headline news on SABC radio, various radio stations. Now, that counter-revolutionary offensive, comrade, must not go unchallenged. Particularly post-elections, then the ANC go into the same bed with the same forces that wanted to remove it out of power. What must we think? Now, an important question, this so that it doesn't confuse our cadreship, came about when one of the leaders said, well, our choice of they said the DA, our choice of the DA is not different in a sense that the DA, EFF and MK party are all hostile to the ANC. So what is the problem? And we entered the fray to indicate that the difference is that the DA is a party of the capitalist forces. The party, the spokesperson of monopoly capital in this country. It has no interest of the people of our country. But under democracy, even such reactionary forces are allowed to exist. They must not confuse revolutionaries. In this regard, we were not endorsing either the EFF or the MK party. We were saying in setting up the minority government, yes, the ANC could have worked with the EFF. And we made our stance very clear in that regard. And very clear also against the MK party. I felt it's important that we clarify this so that this matter is clear from our structures, not from what the media continues to say. Now, the National Democratic Revolution, comrades, our deeper analysis is that it has reached a very difficult moment. We have suffered a major setback, and we can say this NDR has been derailed. Because of this derailment, it will require the forces of the National Democratic Revolution to come together, strategize together, develop a joint program to respond and to rebuild itself. But what were the causes for its derailment? Fundamentally, economic policy choices of neoliberalism that favors big capital than resolving the problems of the people. One of my comrades here, you know, and I have to reveal this because Comrade Mbeki, President Mbeki, we used to debate this piece of yours that you addressed the University of, I think you were in Ottawa in Canada. And you had a piece titled, if I'm not mistaken, When the Seed of Time Has Come, when the germination of a seed, when its time has come. We're talking about the upsurge of mass struggles in our country to destroy apartheid. And we're excited as young MK cadres reading this piece. We're talking strongly about this Thabo Mbeki. Then in this discussion, one comrade says, hey, but you know, I hear you are obsessed with this Thabo Mbeki guy. And at the time, you were head of our international relations. And he says, have you read some pieces by his brother, Mweleti? So I must appreciate that Comrade Mweleti is here, is my special guest. Thank you very much, Comrade Mweleti. So from time to time, I give myself time to go and engage with him. And of course, he's got very strong views. And I now understood why that question arose. But Comrade Meleti poses this question to me. He says, yeah, comrade, I hear you. But what will you say is the national grievance of the people today? Because this movement over the years has always tried to tackle this question. I'm going to respond to this question today, Comrade Meleti, as we respond to the challenges facing the National Democratic Revolution. To say, first, we need this deeper analysis of the state of the NDR and to come with a renewed strategy collectively as a movement. And this new strategy should start from rejecting any collaborationist tendencies that will undermine the NDR, that will betray the hopes of our people, that will capitulate to capital and to reactionary forces. Lenin also reminds us that revolutionary compromises, although necessary, must not come at the expense of principles. That political power, especially for the working class, remains the central question of any revolution. So, what Lenin is also saying in our case is that when you are elected by the people into political office, don't undermine their confidence and become arrogant. I can tell you, comrades, when I arrogant ngiyaz. Arrogance. Yama comrade way to go movement. Sometimes I'm like, if this comrade can behave like this to us who are their peers in leadership, what is their general behavior with our people? Some time ago, I had security protection from the SAPS. I was in the Eastern Cape. I get into this car with our comrades. Later on, when they are dropping me at the airport, they say, hey, but comrade, you know, we must just appreciate that today we were with a comrade. Because, hey, these comrades, sometimes they don't treat us nice. They belittle us. They send us for small things, unnecessary things when we are here to protect their life and we are prepared to die for them. Sometimes they have programs such that people don't even have time to eat. So I know arrogance displayed to us and the arrogance displayed to our people, which has cost us the election, the weakness of leadership. But the National Democratic Revolution, comrades, it's important to say, its root cause was from the Second World Congress of the Communist International in 1920, which represented a national revolutionary process of transformation. This process was a consequence of the communist movement debating the national question in the colonies. And therefore, the National Democratic Revolution is not entirely a South African thing. It's an international program of the national liberation forces who were fighting against colonialism and for independence. We adapted it to our own condition. Hence, we characterize colonialism of a special type in the conditions of South Africa, in which the enemy and the people were occupying the same place. For instance, we have over centuries the colonizers who were already here and were not returning back to Europe. So these colonizers were now indigenized, so to speak. Comrade from Azapo will discuss this question later on what is an appropriate terminology of the indigenization of the European settlers in our country. So we had settler colonialism. And in this settler colonialism, we equally developed how to resolve the South African conditions of the working people and the national people. And we said, in our case, one of the immediate tasks of the National Democratic Revolution will be to end national oppression of the African majority, that is, black people in general and Africans in particular. But further said, in this regard, we remain committed to a non-racial South Africa. And we also want to fight against patriarchy, the foundation of gender-based violence, the basic foundation. There are many other reasons for it. But patriarchy as a system of unequal power relation between men and women was also an expression of the colonial capitalist system. And therefore we had to resolve this thing and create and have a commitment to create a non-sexist society. And therefore end national oppression of one national group by the other. That's our adaptation of the National Democratic Revolution to the conditions of South Africa. But its core task remain national anti-imperialist democratic revolution. That's the foundation of this NDR. It's not just some nice word to say when you are happy and say you know politics. And in this case, there were also discussions, by the way, by the communist movement. One of the discussions was particularly a concern raised by the comrades from India, wherein in India, the colonial bourgeoisie had already entangled the local elites, promoted them to project a posture of what we characterize in inverted commas, national black bourgeoisie. In our case, we can call them the black bourgeoisie. In India, this was the localized bourgeoisie. Oh, Petrus Mutsipa. But Mutsipa is in the production sector as well, you know. That's different. So when they were dealing with this question, they said, the Indian comrades were raising this question that these indigenous bourgeoisies are entangled with the interests of colonial capital. And therefore, they cannot be fully relied upon to execute and prosecute the struggle to the ultimate end. That is why, in our case, the adaptation was the program of the National Democratic Revolution will be driven by the interest of the working class. In other words, the working class aspiration, which is the aspiration of the majority, will constitute the soul of the National Democratic Revolution. And the organizational form will be the Progressive National Movement, the African National Congress, in this regard. So that's why our interrelation with the African National Congress is not whether leaders can sit and laugh at each other as and when they want. It's this intertwinement, the umbilical cord that binds us. So it is in this regard that equally, this entanglement, the comrades from India raised a concern that this resulted, if you allow the political elite to be central to deciding the future of society, it allows bourgeois reformism that prioritize capitalist wealth accumulation over genuine liberation and social emancipation of the people. And that the accumulation of wealth on a capitalist basis was now anchored in the economic exploitation of workers by the capitalist bosses, both those who come from the colonial powers and imperialist centers on the one hand, and those who come from the local domestic bourgeoisie. The domestic bourgeoisie were themselves equally interested in the exploitation of the masses of the working class because of their vested interest in profit maximization. Why do you think we were colonized? Let's ask this principal question. Why do you think we were colonized? The rapacious accumulation of capital to make profit, and for colonial masters to get resources back to Europe in particular. That's the foundation. That is why capital remains our strategic opponent as a liberation movement. And therefore, we cannot capitulate to these capitalist forces. At the same time, the Comintern at the time distinguished national revolutionary path from this reformist agenda. Our own in South African conditions, for instance, in 1955 we adopted the Freedom Charter, which charted another revolutionary path towards liberation and social emancipation of our people. And if you read the economic clause of the Freedom Charter, emphasize, for instance, state ownership and public wealth, that is directly opposed to the, or is an antithesis of the reformist agenda of neoliberalism today in our country. At the same time, I'll read one of the clauses of the Freedom Charter at length, but let me complete this sentence. In the 1960 meeting of communist and workers' parties in the Soviet Union, which further refined the theory and strategy of the National Democratic Revolution, it reaffirmed the centrality of political freedom and liberation, as well as economic and social emancipation. So this theory was further developed. And as part of this movement, as the Communist Party, we continue to also engage our national liberation forces in this regard. This meeting of the National Communist and Workers' Parties continue to define the NDR in different colonized countries as national anti-imperialist democratic revolutions. And they even went further. It can be understood, because this was a meeting of communist and workers' parties, that this historic mission has a task of pursuing a non-capitalist form of development in order to meet the material needs of the people. And that became the central elaboration of the SACP on the National Democratic Revolution as the direct and the shortest route to socialism. For instance, here's our dear ambassador from Eritrea. I always say, if you are a socialist in Africa and you have not been to Eritrea, you will never understand mass progress that the people can make in realizing social equality. And we need a task, Ambassador Omar, every year, a joint visit of party cadres to Eritrea. La bayasajwa abantu base Eritrea. Ku government wethu. Prime Minister umngani wami ufuna ukuza la. They can't give him diplomatic passage. Akazi government enjani esirana yona. Let alone President Afwerki. One of our strongest comrades as well on this African continent. But the thing that also worries the Eritreans is that you comrades in South Africa, you don't want to work with us practically on economic matters. But here, the companies that we work with, you must hear this very clearly. They say the companies that we work with in the mining sector, majority of them are from Canada, Australia, Britain, and so forth. But all of this, their top management and technical teams are South African people, because they issue them permits to work there. They say, but what is the problem? Here are many South Africans working as professionals here for foreign companies. We have to rectify this thing. Of course, comrade, the 1962 program of the South African Communist Party, the South African Road to Freedom, further elaborated this question of the National Democratic Revolution and conceptualized appropriately the concept of colonialism of a special type, which itself became an important contribution to the theory of Marxism and revolutionary thought within colonies. And therefore, this was also a response to the May 1961 declaration by the apartheid regime of an independent republic in South Africa. So we had to respond to that reality. At the same time, we appreciated that we were living in a country that was completely occupied by colonizers. And the Communist Party's articulation of this, the National Democratic Revolution, was further made as a contribution, and the ANC on its own, in its 1969 strategy and tactics adopted at Morogoro, further elaborated the gist of what the National Democratic Revolution is about. In the Morogoro strategy and tactics, the ANC says this about the National Democratic Revolution. I quote, they say, thus our nationalism must not be confused with chauvinism or narrow nationalism of a previous epoch. It must not be confused with the classical drive by an elitist group among the oppressed people to gain ascendancy so that they can replace the oppressor in the exploitation of the mass. Close quote. This ANC strategy and tactics, Morogoro. It further says, our drive towards national emancipation is therefore a very real way bound up with economic emancipation. We have suffered more than just national humiliation. Our people are deprived of their dues in the country's wealth. Their skills have been suppressed, and poverty and starvation has been their life experience. The correction of these centuries-old economic injustices lies at the very core of our national aspirations. One thing is certain, in our land, this cannot be effectively tackled unless the basic wealth and the basic resources are at the disposal of the people as a whole and are not manipulated by sections or individuals, be they white or black. Close quote. This is the ANC in Morogoro. The Freedom Charter, in its clause 3, the people shall share in the country's wealth, states the following: the national wealth of our country, the heritage of all South Africans, shall be restored to the people. The mineral wealth beneath the soil, the banks and monopoly industry shall be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. All other industry and grievance of the industry and trade, shall be controlled to assist the well-being of the people. All people shall have equal rights to trade where they choose, to manufacture and to enter all trades, crafts and profession. This is the clause 3 of the Freedom Charter. I'm deliberately reading this because I'm emphasizing the concept of what is the National Democratic Revolution and its adaptations to the South African material condition by our liberation movement. What is it that we are in alliance with? The 4th clause says, is the clause that says the land shall be shared among those who work it. It says, restriction, this is the Freedom Charter 4th clause. Restrictions of land ownership on a racial basis shall be ended, and all the land redivided amongst those who work it, to banish famine and land hunger. The state shall help the peasant with implements, seeds, tractors, and dams to save the soil and assist the tillers. Freedom of movement shall be guaranteed to all who work on the land. All shall have the right to occupy land wherever they choose. People shall not be robbed of their cattle, and forced labor and farm prisons shall be abolished. This is the fourth clause of the Freedom Charter. I read it in full. Now, comrades, I want to respond as part of our response to Comrade Mweleti. He said, what is your grievance now? I have demonstrated by outlining this to appreciate that you all know land hunger in this country continues 3 decades into democracy. So, to fully resolve the national grievance of the black people in general and Africans in particular, which is to resolve the land question. That's the answer, Comrade Mweleti. We have not resolved this question. This is the question Zumbango Ekaya. This is the question, the source of poverty in our country. We have to resolve this question. And in order to resolve this question, we call for radical measures to relook on the land question with the opening of the dates preventing the return of colonially disposed land to their rightful owners, and for effective redistribution of land to the hungry masses, and engaging the erstwhile colonizers to pay reparations. We should be ready, comrades, for a long haul, and even to mobilize for a referendum in this regard. Because some of the people want to believe that because we've got the Constitutional Court in this country, the people will no longer have a say. No, we need to bring back this question, even if it means having a referendum on this matter. We cannot carry, my comrades, the sins of unrepentant colonizers who use their economic power to force us towards self-colonization, which is what we characterize this deal between the ANC and the DA. This deal, when looked in different prisms, it's self-colonization. When you are ungasastand, you hand yourself over even to our enemies. We cannot sell our soul in this regard. This is the basis, comrade, that every time our revolution has extended a hand of friendship and humanity, it has been rudely inflicted with more damage. And sometimes, it is high time that capital takes its responsibility for its own sins. Man engage and mama says, one old lady, uhlangana nami egarage, ngenza umsebenzi wepart. And this is one of the greatest inspiration that I have, because when I meet the people, they say, abanye bethu bayasaba ma comrade, but hey, bazokubulala wena. Abanye bakhuluma ngale zinto in public. And this thing affects our families. The other time, okay, let me leave this part of the family and focus here. But this old lady says to me, yabona mntanami, uthi siyakuthandazela. Uqini, siyakuthandazela. Kodwa ngempela nina inkinga yenu ukuthi nacolela abantu abangalicelanga uxolo. President Mbeki, I'll want you one day to reflect on this thing with us. This was the view from an old lady greeting me at a garage and saying, "Siyakthandazela." So, this stance, comrades, must categorically reject any elitist nationalism and bourgeois reformist tendency. This is the stance both of the Freedom Charter and the ANC strategy and tactics. But if you like, the national grievance of the masses today is also their continued denial of their access to wealth by an elite pact of the ruling class and section of the liberation movement. Comrade Meleti, that's the second response on this, the national grievance. Clearly, the narrow nationalist elites have abandoned the class content of the national democratic revolution and thus are unable to transform the economy to be in the hands of the people. Of course, comrades, one of the tasks that is facing us in this Congress is the SACP's clear independent ideology and independent organizational presence and identity in order to drive a determined and unwavering struggle to end poverty in our communities, unemployment and inequality, and to clamp down on crime and deal with capitalist exploitation in general. We have a duty, comrades, to ready ourselves for the difficult task ahead, given the changed political situation. It is in this regard that, for instance, whilst we have noted the positive outcomes, we shared this thing with the media yesterday, because some of them are creating an impression that we are not registering any progress we have made in the last 30 years. No, we appreciate this progress, massive progress. But this progress was largely the responsibility of government. Electrification, water articulation, building millions of houses for the poor, access to education and everything else. This has been the achievement of the revolutionary government. Capital has been running away scot-free on this. Of course, comrades, we have started some work in our communities. We have seen some of the leadership we have invited here from traditional leaders. Some of them were working in their communities as traditional leaders. In other words, when you go to villages, whilst we have a democratic local government system, you also have traditional system. We have started village development programs, turning around the living conditions of the villagers. These are pilot programs, but they are reaching a stage where we cannot keep them as pilots. Private talks. Because of this crisis of working in the villages, particularly to tackle the crisis of hunger and poverty, we start by assisting the communities on how to plow the land and grow their own food across the country. We started this thing at the village of Paramount Queen Clara Mashile. She's here. They've introduced her presence, and she has received us very well. She will forgive me to say this. A young, intelligent, educated African Paramount Queen, committed to the development of a community. And she said, I'm not afraid to engage with you communists because I see you are trying to set up some programs in my community. Let's engage. I've got ideas. And we had discussions with her, and we realized that with such kind of leadership in our communities, and another vibrant king Shole from the northwest. Amazing group of traditional leaders. But with Paramount Queen Clara in Matibidi, we started a project to till the land. And we found that the area has no water. So we went to our comrades from the Communist Party of China and said, hey, we want assistance to put up a borehole in this area because we are starting a rural development program, a village program, and we know you used this kind of a program to end hunger in China and to lift over 750 million people out of poverty. That's a revolution in motion. They said, no, we will help you. We are putting up 3 boreholes in Matibidi. We are fencing a community area to plow the land. Now we went to other areas in the northwest. In the northwest, we found that there are 42 villages. Too difficult for us. And we went to Dumeri in Limpopo. We have already put up a borehole and assisted old women in the village who were plowing food, and their pump had broken for over 4 years. It could not be fixed because Eskom was having a problem of fixing load shedding in the country. We put up a borehole. We went to Asserting village in Kwakwa, Free State, Akhoshi Muloi, the heroic Muloi. And we put up a borehole in the community. We are putting a program to make sure that in every area where we go in these villages, ultimately, every single household would have someone working and having an income and also secured by food security. Now, this is not making the party a peasant organization, but we are tackling the problems of the masses on the ground. But we have realized that these things are too expensive. Everywhere we go, we have to put up these boreholes and so forth. They cost big money. Now we came back to do an assessment with my team. We have set up a permanent team at the party headquarters. It's led by this comrade here, PJ. It's led by this comrade. He's a member of our central committee, Comrade PJ Mguni. But the problem is that we can't even pay him. He's getting a stipend. So, but he's doing well. In our assessment, we have now said, no, it's impossible. We have done something in Kutama. We have done something in Libode. Everywhere we are begging for our people to have something to eat. We have now agreed that actually what we need to develop, we need to buy drilling trucks. That's when Tate Motsepe you come in. Because it's too expensive. We are realizing that already, if we have just from the beginning bought a drilling truck, we will be doing more villages. Because it's difficult. Our people have a crisis of water. That's a fundamental problem in our communities. So we need to tackle this question. Of course, comrades, in this regard, Chairperson, I'm within my timelines, but I'm going to come towards the ending. In this regard, we have worked with our traditional leaders across the board. We recently in Mpumalanga. Ubabu Inkosi Usezo Mahlangu also said, I'm willing to work with you in my community to give you pieces of land so that we can banish hunger. Because the state that has responsibility to do this only looks after commercial agriculture. And commercial agriculture is not interested in food security of the people. It's interested in food export. They treat food as basic commodity that is sold in the market. They even abstract the value of labor in that commodity that's sold in the market. So this is one of the tasks that we are faced with. And of course, this program in our communities, comrade, we want our structures to embrace this program. Equally, to embrace the programs to build community stores. Community stores. We're having a crisis in the spaza shops. We have seen the response by the Gauteng government, for instance, which we are impressed with the pace of response by the Gauteng government. I'm impressed with the Gauteng government, I must say so. They are just doing well. You throttle them. I know that they robbed you now of almost 9 billion. There's austerity measures on Gauteng government. So they are trying to sabotage the capacity of this government. They took away 9 billion. The treasury, the budget when they were presenting it, I follow it up in Minasho. I follow up whatever is happening here in Gauteng. So we want to establish community shops where the community can own their own stores. We have started some of these programs in our communities, including also in that village in Matibidi. We are doing that work. Comrade Teboko Padu, one of our MK combatants. We trained him, the last consignment, Comrade Tabo, to be trained in the Soviet Union. He was involved from the beginning in the working group on the RDP. After he came back, there were these young intellectuals still embodied with the ideas of socialism. But unfortunately, the collapse of the Soviet system happened when they were there. But comrades, the other critical question, of course, is that we are still met as a country in a process in which public provision of services is compromised by neoliberal economic policies of austerity. It's further compromised by corruption and private provision of services, including through state standardization, even compromising various areas, including in health and education. Comrade Mtwaledi gave an extensive presentation here yesterday. And it was deliberate to invite him to come here and give that presentation. He has given that presentation to a special central committee, which we invited him to do because of the response against the introduction of the National Health Insurance. This program of the National Health Insurance, comrades, is a class war. It has to be understood in that context. This is a class war. It's an offensive by capital against the working class. We have to defend the lives of our people by ensuring that the National Health Insurance is implemented. We must also, comrade, deal with crime in our communities, especially because now the security of our people is reliant on private security. And the state spend too much money on this private security instead of training our people to provide security in our communities. Like what the Premier of Gauteng had started, Comrade Panyaza. So this is very important to appreciate that we can do these things on our own. But on this question of crime, comrades, we are equally worried as the Communist Party, particularly about the general insecurity of our people who are enduring a series of problems in the communities. The scourge of drugs, theft, motor vehicles, and now motor vehicle hijackings and house hijackings. This is a new trend of house hijackings in our country. This must come to an end. President Dakana, you know it as the president of SANCO, that this is one of the general problems the community are complaining about. The house breakings, robberies, murders, and massacres. A new trend of multiple murderers of people, massacres. We have to deal with this crisis in our communities. Femicide and gender-based violence and other contact crime have to come to an end through mass mobilization by the Communist Party in our communities. In this, comrades, we have also seen public infrastructure being affected and also being attacked and looted, including electricity infrastructure. Now, we have to know, comrade, that equally, from an economic sense, crime is bad also for investment. Very bad. Let me also say something about a peculiar crime in our country that we have picked up in our Tambo region, Mthatha, Mqhekezweni, where former President Nelson Mandela also stayed. In that community, there's a peculiar crime of extortion, what we call sextortion. So criminals demand that women must leave 200 rands on the window panes in order not to be raped. Certainly, comrades, we need a special program by our province in the Eastern Cape. And so far, we are unhappy about your attitude to this problem, comrades, in the Eastern Cape. We must say so from this platform. We have said it nicely. But this is not a matter to say nicely, comrade Provincial Chair Mkhaga. It's not a nice matter, this one, because after we said, let's launch an intensive program to stop this crisis, the comrades go on a long process of planning. By the time they are coming with plans, 6 young women are raped preparing for matric exams. And a local matriarch, the local Queen Mkhaga, it's also murdered. And I'm not saying that if we had our program, this could have been prevented. But if we have shown presence and a voice in the community that we are attacking this crisis, we could have saved lives. We could have saved the trauma that these young women will live with for the rest of their lives. Now we need a special program on this thing. At the national level, we have already engaged our comrades in POPCRO, our trade union, the mighty POPCRO. We have said to POPCRO, we need your intervention here, working jointly with us. We have also engaged other unions. We have engaged the leadership of COSATU to say, let's go there and tackle this crisis. It cannot be, comrades, that, when we get to know this thing, we do it in a desktop research from headquarters. We establish a war room to tackle this crisis with our organizing unit. We found that women in the area, those without children, have left the area. Those with children at school have to endure these traumatic experiences of being constantly raped. One woman even said in public when the minister went there with the commissioner of the police that she knows that 3 times in a month she will be raped. Aye, comrade, how possible is this thing that the Communist Party is alerted of this question? They do nothing. The district secretary of that area must fully account. We need a full program on this thing and a campaign in Mqhekezweni by the Communist Party. If this doesn't happen, comrades, we will show you that that's not how to run the Communist Party. The Communist Party, we have said, must get rid of the Kevin Carter syndrome. Kevin Carter was that journalist, multi-award winning journalist of the Bang Bang Club. The comrades in Thokoza, they don't love this Bang Bang Club. Because this group of journalists was there during the war. And they were in the front line when our comrades were dying and they were taking pictures and everything else. And they went on to do a documentary of my community without involving them. But Kevin Carter is the guy that took that picture that won international awards of a vulture wanting to attack a malnourished kid in Sudan. When her parents have put her under a shade to go a kilometer away to be on a queue for food. The parents were there, but both of them, the mother and the father, each one felt that they can come back with a bag of meal. So they all went there and live under the shade. This vulture comes. Now, Kevin Carter is asked this question, but what happened to the child? He said, no, that's not my job. My job is to take a picture. Of course, the issue that the child, there's no evidence that the child ever survived. And when this thing came out, and everyone kept asking him what happened to the child, and they gave him a big award with prize money. He got into a depression. He ultimately died. We're not celebrating his death. What we are saying is, we are not a party to observe a problem, to analyze a problem, and then walk away. No, we're not that party. The party that we are talking about is the party that should say, before Christmas, the people of Umtegezweni, the women, should feel free, even if they forget to close the doors of their houses and sleep in peace. That's when we know the party exists there, both in the district and in the locality. If it doesn't exist in the locality, we must go there and help it to exist. So this must apply across the board. At the same time, comrade, we have said, the Communist Party must also articulate clearly the economic task of a party branch. So party branch is not just a branch of theorists who will gather at a local school and have a good discussion about Marxism, Leninism, and quote Lenin and everything else and say, no, I'm a good comrade. Now I'm ready for a candidate in the next election. No. The barometer must be different. The role of the party branch, the economic role and task of the party branch in the community. I know many of you are doing many other things, good things in the community as well. Some of you are having foundations and so forth, which are doing well to support local struggles. But we must bring in the collective might of our organization to improve the living conditions of our people. It is in this regard, comrade, that I now want to give you a feedback on the concept of the reconfiguration of the alliance, where we are. This reconfiguration, it's a consequence or lack thereof, and the way we are moving forward with regard to economic policies or even contesting election has to do with the failure of our movement to reconfigure itself. Firstly, we started this process as the Communist Party through our Young Communist League. The Young Communist League at the 2002 Congress in Rustenburg made a presentation that the Communist Party must contest elections. The SACP then took this matter to the Special National Congress in Durban in 2005. That Special National Congress then decided and crafted a resolution to be discussed at the 2007 Congress in Port Elizabeth. The Port Elizabeth Congress of the party then resolved on the concept of the reconfiguration of the alliance. And we then engaged our comrades in the movement on this matter. We also went to Ngoye Congress in 2012, and this matter was still on the agenda. We also resolved on this one. We improved our resolution on the reconfiguration of the alliance. And we took this to the alliance component. It is during that time, towards the end of the Congress at Ngoye, the term of that Congress, which was the 13th Congress, towards the 14th Congress, here in Ekurhuleni, that some discussions in the movement took place. These discussions reflected the fact that the SACP can no longer work within the current reconfiguration of the alliance or support the ANC in elections without the reconfiguration of the alliance. So in this regard, we made several resolutions. They are in your frame documents here in this book. There are various Congress resolutions on this question. What I'm elaborating to you is now internal discussions inside the movement. These internal discussions led to this 14th Congress here. I presented that resolution here in Ekurhuleni. I remember saying to you, comrades, when I was presenting this resolution, you were very excited. You were clapping your hands. I said, whoa. Because you did not want me to finish reading the resolution in its entirety. But nonetheless, 2 decades later, this is where we are. We are at a point where, for instance, after that Ngoye Congress, which allowed some form of representation by our structures to the Central Committee to contest elections with valid reasons. For instance, among those valid reasons were whether the ANC would have followed inclusive processes. And if comrades felt they were isolated or targeted, the Central Committee can listen to their views. And in this regard, in 2016, we then had the Metsimaholo experience along the same lines, where the Free State province, through our district in the Free State, that wrote about the concern at Metsimaholo municipality, the expulsion of over 195 SAMU workers. And when we could not resolve this problem, and they gave reasons, the Central Committee approved them to stand. And we contested Metsimaholo municipality. So in the coming election, that will also be one of the experiences that we look into. All experiences. There were several others before the Ngoye resolution came about. Some of the comrades decided to stand as independents and were later expelled from the ANC. Expelled from the Communist Party. Later on, the ANC worked with them when they were councillors as independents. Some of them, like in the Eastern Cape, at Alfred Nzo, they registered directly with the IC. Then I had to go and stop on behalf of the Central Committee their application to be on the ballot at the IEC, because they had not got permission from the Central Committee and the province had not approved it. And others in Maruleng, in the northwest, ultimately left and created a local communist party to contest elections. In Moutse, others created what they called the Bolshevik Party, led by Comrade Siet. So when I meet him with the Bolshevik. So this experience, comrades, created an impression that certainly the party needed to resolve this question without finding itself disintegrating. And we had a discussion at the 14th Congress, That 14th Congress then gave us a tight mandate. That tight mandate included engaging fully the alliances, and the alliance said, let's have a joint discussion document, but the Communist Party must start. We started by developing a discussion document. This discussion document, which was crafted by Comrade David Masondo, he was the lead person of this discussion document. At the time, Comrade Masondo was in the NEC of the ANC, still in the NEC of the ANC in his own right. And he was the principal of the O.R. Tambo's leadership school. And President Zuma said no, he doesn't trust him enough, because he wrote one of his intellectual pieces criticizing him on the national question and ethno-nationalism. So I think he was still hurt by that. He said, no, I don't trust this one, because he was in the Communist League, the Young Communist League, when they spoke about this thing. So he will be biased on this question. So can I make comments on this document? He made extensive comments, which we also responded through a discussion document as the SACP. And ultimately, the ANC replaced Comrade Masondo with Comrade Natim Tetwa, who was member of the NEC and responsible for political education, to drive this project. And we sent our team there to work with him. COSATU developed its own discussion document. So the SACP had discussion document, COSATU had discussion document, SANCO made presentations. President Mtagana, you were there. Comrade Skumbuzo, at the time, was in the secretariat, had said they were coming from the NEC. He had not managed to compile the NEC discussion, but he read to us the views of the NEC of SANCO. So they were added by the team that was working on this document. So ultimately, this joint task team, led by Comrade Natim Tetwa, with Comrade Alex Mashilu and the ANC team, amongst them Comrade Nef Manana, who recently died. When they deal with this question of the memorial, his name will appear there. He was in that particular team and other team of ANC leaders and comrades. Then, in November 2019, the Alliance adopted a joint document on the reconfiguration of the Alliance. The Alliance adopted a joint document on reconfiguration of the Alliance. It's in this pack. It's called Towards the Reconfiguration of the Alliance. Now, this document, when it was supposed to be implemented across the structures of the Alliance nationally, in 2020, we had agreed as the leadership of the Alliance Political Council, that's the national officials, to visit all provinces and meet with the PECs for the implementation of this program, of this joint agreement. Then, Comrade Ace Makashule, then SG of the African National Congress, said, this document has got far-reaching implications. It has been approved by the NEC. For COSATU, it has even gone to the Central Executive Committee of COSATU. For us, it has gone to the 2019 Special National Congress. So, Comrade Ace, feeling that only the ANC, NEC has discussed this document, felt that this document must be taken to the NGC of the ANC. We said, no problem. Let's take it to the NGC. Then 2020, we had COVID-19. And the year that the NGC was supposed to be convened, it could not be convened in 2019 because of the NGC could not be convened because of COVID-19. As a result, the ANC never properly discussed this question through their branch structures. But in the run-up to 2022 National Conference, the ANC releases discussion documents and they leave this document on the reconfiguration of the alliance, we tell them, we alert them about this thing. And say, you need to bring this question because the NGC has not taken place. At least let Congress discuss this matter. Or let the structures discuss this matter. And ultimately, as you know, this was not properly discussed, except that the president of the ANC, addressing the Nasrec conference December 2022, spoke about the reconfiguration of the alliance, but briefly. But all what he said was positive. The SG's report, or the Secretariat report, presented by then Deputy President D.D. Mabuza, because the SG was then suspended or expelled, presented the organizational report and derided the alliance on reconfiguration of the alliance and said, we want to micromanage the ANC. That's not what we are saying, or we were saying. In any case, he was part and parcel of the discussions on this document. We felt it's important, comrade, to understand where we come from. But our own 15th National Congress, held here in Ekurhuleni, in this venue, Birchwood, resolved that we must now contest elections with or without the reconfiguration of the alliance. And we must do so. We must confirm to do this if the reconfiguration of the alliance has not taken place by the next augmented Central Committee. Our augmented Central Committees, which is the extension of district layer level of leadership and extra members of the provinces to PEC to attend, an extra delegation from the Young Communist League to attend that meeting of the Central Committee, normally takes place at the end of the year. Now, Comrade Mukhacha, you were very good. You helped us on this question. Because when this resolution is taken, and it's very important to say this thing, comrade, so that you understand it, because the wedge drivers on this question, cheers, comrade. On this question, the wedge drivers have said, this position is not a position of the Communist Party. Yes, they even influence some of our structures to believe so. That is why I'm saying to Comrade Mukhacha, thank you very much. Because if you did not stand up in that Congress to call for timelines on video in order to garner, on the basis of these timelines, the full concurrence of Congress to resolve in that form, will be in trouble, will be deeply divided as a Communist Party. Because, comrades, at the time that Congress took the decision, I am not in the plenary of Congress as newly elected General Secretary, together with the rest of the officials. We have left Comrade Thulas Nesi to chair Congress. You remember the results were announced late, and the media was waiting for us. So the media team then said, let's go and address the media so that they can leave. They've been waiting here. We left the wall to come and address the media here. When Congress resolve on this matter, I'm not even in the plenary of Congress. My job is to implement all decisions of the Central Committee and the Congress. On that platform, there will be no wavering. So, some of our comrades then said, no, later on, we didn't take such a decision. Yes. And this is not to divide our leadership, but is to say this angle came up. When it came up, we had to get the video. It's 18 minutes video of all deliberations. I remember in that video, we saw even some of the things we were not supposed to see because we were shocked. Oh, these delegates. Because when it happened, I was not in the plenary of Congress. Comrade Dibulelo was the second deputy national secretary of the Young Communist League, and the Young Communist League delegation climbed on tables to celebrate. Celebrating this victory. That now there's timeline. We say by the next augmented central committee, if the alliance doesn't take decisions, we are going ahead to contest elections with or without the reconfiguration of the alliance. Now, this matter, comrades, it then reached a point where, of course, we had to show this video to articulate the real decision. But we immediately convened a meeting of the alliance. First bilateral with the ANC. After that Congress. And we said, comrades, we have been saying this before, many a times, that this is not a peculiar problem of the Communist Party and the components of the alliance. It was no longer actually our only matter. It was a collective matter of the entire alliance. We said, help us to resolve this problem as a movement. The ANC officials said no in September 2022. They said we will convene a special NEC in October to deal with this matter so that we can prepare for this matter, how it will be handled by the ANC National Conference. That meeting never took place. We understood when it never took place. There were many court cases. There was not even a possibility. You remember there were difficulties towards that national conference of the ANC. And there were many other things. Part of the reasons why, for instance, as part of what we call self-revolution of cadres of the movement. That self-revolution, when it comes, all of us must cleanse ourselves so that we don't contaminate the movement. And as we do so, we should never think that the movement lacks leadership. It will be a mistake to think so. No one should be spared of this, including at the top here in the Communist Party. Once I misbehave and damage the image of the Communist Party by my reckless behavior, I must take responsibility on my own, not contaminate and drag the Communist Party in. On this question, of course, we reached a point where there was no reconfiguration. Now we had our augmented central committee on the 30th of March and the 1st of April 2023. That augmented central committee, we must indicate, comrades, because it was supposed to take place end of the year, we shifted it, trying to buy time of engagement within the alliance. We even went to COSATU. We were also blamed, by the way, when there were problems in the National Congress of COSATU. Because this question even created serious tensions in the Federation. And some of them even blamed us. For instance, the national chair of the ANC did not address that Congress of COSATU. Workers refused. And they blamed me. They said, I had the power to stop the workers. On what basis, when there's Mike Shingange, there's Comrade Zingi Swalosi, and the General Secretary at the time, who are leading their own delegation? I was invited to provide a solidarity message from an alliance. But the bottom line is that it created problems across the movement. Now, the Central Committee, when it ended on the 1st of April last year, we released a statement. In that statement, after we've taken two main decisions related to this question. The first was that this was not in the statement, but the decision of the Central Committee was that we will contest the next local government elections. And we gave reasons for that, because the reconfiguration of the alliance has not taken place. The second was that we will not contest the general elections because of the threats facing the movement, the counter-revolutionary threats facing the movement. Some of those I've spoken about it. And few months later, there was the establishment of the Moonshot Pact in South Africa, which actually confirmed the fears and the analysis of the South African Communist Party. So on that basis, we did not want to articulate this matter, to take out this matter in public and confuse the public that we are going to support the ANC in the national elections, but we are still going to contest on our own in the coming elections. So we kept this on our own until we have had a proper bilateral meeting with the African National Congress. What it also means, comrades, is that since last year, April, we only had a bilateral meeting with the ANC 2.5 weeks ago. Yes, we were meeting in general alliance meetings, political council, elections, and this and that, many others, but never the bilateral. So only 2 weeks ago, when we were in the bilateral meeting, we now officially told them the truth. I remember just 2 days before that, or a few days before that, I had an interview with the Mail and Guardian. And they say, so they didn't know that we've taken this decision. I could not disclose it to them before we've disclosed it to the ANC as our ally, that we've been contesting election through them. And they wrote a headline that SACP will support the ANC, still support the ANC in the coming elections. That was the headline of the Mail and Guardian just a few days before we met the ANC. But when we met them officially, we then presented to them the decision of the Augmented Central Committee, which was practically implementing that decision of the 15th Congress to contest elections with or without the reconfiguration of the alliance by the Augmented Central Committee. In other words, comrades, our dear leadership in the ANC ignored this matter. They treated it scantily until last 2 weeks ago, when they said, okay, now let's have another meeting in January. We agreed to this meeting. We will see how to plan that meeting. But the meeting in January has nothing to do with the implementation of our decision. Completely. So that you understand, the decision to contest local government elections has been taken by our Congress with the timelines that we respected to engage our movement, by the Augmented Central Committee that affirmed this position. Now we are ready to contest local government elections. Now, comrades, I want to say, I hear you that you are celebrating this. Deep down in my heart, deep down in my heart of hearts, there's a bleeding part of me, because the weaknesses of leadership had led to this situation. The arrogance of political power has led to this decision. Factionalism, corruption, and using politics to corrupt and nullify the entire liberation movement had led us to this. Now, you know, when we invited the ANC to come to this conference, and we respect the delegation that is here fully. When we invited them here, we invited 10. Then they sent a message that these are the 10, and there will be all 9 provincial secretaries, chairpersons. But one of their chairpersons, Chupuma Tabata, Stan, is a homeboy here. He's a member of this central committee. So he can't qualify on that decision when the ANC deploys their chairpersons here. He's already here. His principal has got voting rights here. He can move a motion. So we agreed to that. Except to say, because we have said, even ourselves, sometimes we ask extra delegation from the ANC. This time, the Secretary General just he just sent a letter. There will be this 10 plus 9 provincial chairpersons. We say he's the Secretary General of the movement. We can't say no, we accept it. He did not even talk to me, Comrade Mbax. But that's okay. We said to the team, accredit all ANC delegation. Now, we are reading this, and we hope we are not reading it incorrectly. The provincial chairpersons, we hope, were not sent to intimidate and bully these ANC members in their different responsibilities as deployees of the ANC in their respective provinces. Because if that were to be the case, then they will not understand who we are up to now. It will be a huge mistake. And therefore, comrades, we have tried our best and have been patient enough to the point of losing our credibility. You know, even some failed politicians and some failed analysts condemn us daily that these ones are spineless. I mean, the other day, because of our condemnation of the GNU, we get responded by Mackenzie. We have no relationship with him. And we're like, why? Because we are brought here by the movement. So, decision is very important to clarify on our own. Does not mean we are leaving the ANC or we have ended the dual membership. There is no such a decision. It does not also mean we have ended the alliance. The alliance still exists. We are asserting our independence. The alliance is made of independent organizations. We are just asserting our independence. And therefore, this organizational independence, ideological independence, even to an extent, may bring in appropriate ideological purification sometimes of ourselves, because we are too much contaminated as well. Unokuthola ukuthi abanye abantu they are moonlightning, abezwa ukuthi baguphi. We don't want that. We want people to be clear. As communists, when they are in the national liberation movement, as communists, when they are in a civic movement, as communists, when they are in the trade union movement, we want that clarity. And this is what we are. And therefore, we want to take responsibility for socialism in our country. And we are not saying we won't need allies in this journey. We need allies. And our primary allies of the African National Congress, COSATU and SANCO, remains important. And is that the National Democratic Revolution as our joint program remains the direct route to socialism for us. It is in this regard, comrades, that we want to reinforce the strength of our alliance. For instance, just as a for instance, this is not to deal with the generality of the point that we're raising. Take the recent municipality in Tabazimbi. We win all the wards. We can't run the municipality because of the proportional allocation system. Imagine if, for instance, there was possibility for reconfiguration. The ANC understanding this. The ANC understanding that it is declining. Imagine if they said to our comrades, without mischief, comrades of the Communist Party, stand here as well, so that either you support us on the wards. I'm just giving an example. You support us on the wards, we support you on proportional allocation. We will be running the municipality proper. They don't even, that part. We are not talking about that now. We are talking about now contesting elections on our own. But what I'm trying to show is that because of the arrogance of leadership, They did not even want to discuss the modalities. We made proposals. One comrade I met in the Northwest says to me, so Mapaila, you guys in the Central Committee, you are still going to talk about the modalities of contesting. Because we have tried every trick in the book to prove that we can do it this way or that way, this way or that way, and strengthen ourselves. All this has been rejected. So we will contest on our own, and the forces of the National Democratic Revolution will continue to work together. Those who will hate us or will be arrogant will be their own. Tina, we are committed to the NDR. We are committed to socialism. We are committed to the struggle of the working people of our country. It is in this regard, comrades, that we have to prepare ourselves for internal reaction from inside the movement. Some of the forces that have begun to threaten our comrades deployed even in their own right as leaders of the ANC. That when you take this decision, you know that you are gone. Because they don't understand themselves. So, it's like they want to... So, Comrade Gwede normally says, you know, he gives this analogy that you cut your nose to spite your face. They don't understand the integration of this movement. That you can't damage the other without damaging yourself. And that's why in our case, it's not damaging the movement. It's asserting our independence. In some instances, Makabani, I don't have to mention areas and provinces. You know, there are times when our comrades, capable comrades, extremely capable comrades, are overlooked for deployment in appropriate positions because they just come from the ticket of the Communist Party, even if they are ANC members in their own right. And we are powerless. We can't do anything about it. Sometimes, you know, we even ask some of our comrades in the ANC. They know it, some of them. I speak to them. Some of them, I go to them. One of them I failed because it's now an open secret now. I failed. Upanyaza. Mchulegi. Ngithe kupanyaza ungafaki into ze Communist Party. We leader ka ANC. Labantu bazokuxosha. Akangilaleli. No, there's no doubt. In the Communist Party, Panyaza, in full, there's no problem with that. But when he was doing the campaign, it's Panyaza. You are now the leader of the ANC. These comrades are intolerant. They are going to deal with you. One of the consequences you are suffering, Comrade Panyaza, is because you are a member of the Communist Party, but we are proud of you as a cadre of the Communist Party in the African National Congress. You do nothing against the African National Congress, but you are empowering it. So you are not a damaging cadre in the African National Congress. So it is in this regard that some of them, I don't have to mention names. One of them I said, Yabona Game Chanam, you are now in this position as a leader of the ANC. Siyakhulula Communist Party, work fully for the ANC. We know you are one of us, ideologically. We can still share documents and other things, strategic things. We have Malo comrade. After a few months, we have no para for no Communist Party. Agafuning rise and Agu Communist Party. But that's okay. So the bottom line is that our cadres, we have good cadres. We have some of the best cadres. You know, nangu cadre la uboginabe, ukedra majuba. One of the special ones. One of the best we have produced, Comrade Tulas. Yawona, selfless. They treated him. They did everything. Condemned him. Even attacked meetings of the Communist Party. Comrade Didi, because I don't want to go to party, Comrade Didi will apologize on this thing in a provincial council where we were invited. How he treated the Communist Party in that province. This comrade stood firm, clear, still one of our best. Recently, they wanted to remove him as MEC. We asked why. But no, because there's a new secretary of the Communist Party. Now, they don't know what they're talking about because this new secretary of the Communist Party says, no. That's my leader. Yes, Comrade Ulaki Mbuyan. Yabonga no pal. You didn't divide the Communist Party for self-interest. You said, no, that's my leader. Let him finish his term. My time will come if it comes. If it doesn't, that's okay. But there was nothing wrong to have both comrades in the executive, for instance. It's because a communist, only one can be taken in. Madrid comrade, is this how you treat your allies? Then in the ANC, this is the provincial leadership of the Communist Party for many years. One of them, Comrade Lakis, worked for the ANC for decades. Even as the head of their political education, they can't trust him to deploy him because he's a member of the Communist Party. No, it can't work like that. Now, this is the level of disrespect we have gone through in this relationship. We are not leaving the relationship, but we are freeing ourselves from the abuse. We will now engage independently as an organization. And therefore, comrades, we want to say, because of these challenges that we are going through, we'll require maximum unity of the SACP structures, maximum unity and respect of each other, even of the comrades who will maybe refuse to leave or refuse to participate in the Communist Party campaigns. Don't condemn them. Allow them, that's their choice. For as long as they remain within the movement, that's okay. Our struggle is one, but it's fought on multiple terrains and multiple fronts. And therefore, for us to do that, we need to rebuild the strength of the Communist Party. We have been doing an analysis, comrades, at the headquarters, including doing analysis of the party presence in voting districts. Comrade Madala will speak at this, our first Deputy General Secretary will speak at length on this question. But we are not happy with your strength in the communities, in the voting districts. You remember some years ago at the Rustenburg Congress, we took the decision to establish voting district-based branches. We want you to be present in every of that locality. But we are equally saying, this is very important, that we are not a purely electoralist party. We are not an electoral machine. But by saying so, we are not saying we are not going to participate in the election. Because some of the comrades in these discussions, because the previous resolution was also articulating this point. We are not set up for elections. We are set up to take up the struggle of the working class, the revolutionary struggle of the working class to advance socialism. So that's the task that we have. So there will be instances where we are going to work with other organizations in multiple forms. There will be times when in various communities we may see that here the cadres from all of us in the movement are weak. We can support a particular person in that community who can articulate and fulfill the mission of that particular community. That's why we're talking about the popular fronts and the broad fronts. In some instances, if these discussions went very well in the alliance, we could say, here we'll support this particular cadre of the ANC to stand. But in the absence of all of that, it's water under the bridge. So we need to strengthen and rejuvenate the strength of the Communist Party and assert its independent voice as a part of the working class. At the same time, we must appreciate Comrade Chairperson that Comrade Lenin warned that a party as a vanguard, the national chair spoke a little bit on this yesterday, but differently. I want to quote Lenin when he was dealing with the agrarian question, 1917. He said something about the Communist Party's task. He says, I quote, "A party is the vanguard of a class, and its duty is to lead the masses and not merely to reflect the average political level of the masses." That's our task. even how to transform communities. So we're not just limiting our capacity to the level of the masses, to also uplift the level of the masses. But when we are with the masses, we must do good. It's a good sign of a party cadre to do good for the masses. And one of our immediate tasks in the medium term, short to medium term, will be to seriously respond and rebuild a campaigning party along the new trends and societal development, not in a rigid, archaic way. For instance, how do we involve science and technology in the form of campaigns and rooting the party amongst the people, even in the villages and the townships? So we need an adaptive party to the new conditions of societal development. We also require to embrace this concept of self-revolution, to anchor the necessary change for renewal of the movement, the renewal of the Communist Party. We can't do things the old way and expect different changes or outcomes. So it is therefore important that the renewal of the movement and the renewal of the Communist Party itself should start with self-reflection, self-revolution. This is what the Communist Party of China says they've discovered. They say they've discovered that they had a mission to study the rise and fall of dynasties, organizations, and states. It's a comprehensive study through the Renmin University of China, the University of the Party. Yeah, the University of the Party. It studies the Communist Party organization and it studies society in detail. They've got the capacity at that level, Comrade President. So they say they found that the major problem in the rise and fall of these dynasties is the weakness of leadership. The inability for leaders to renew themselves. And also for them to leave office when they are now unpopular with their own. Then they start imposing draconian measures. And when they fall, we have people celebrating when one of their leaders has fallen. It should not be. But they said they found the solution. And the solution is on the rise. It's on self-revolution of the individual leaders of society in various components. This is something that we have to institutionalize in the Communist Party. Starting with institutionalizing criticism of ourselves. I've said to the Central Committee, I would take a leadership role as General Secretary and subject myself to a process of criticism. And there will be further other things of scrutiny. For instance, we have in the past spoken about lifestyle audits. We have not subjected ourselves to that process. So we also need to undergo that process. What we call for society and leaders in society, we must also undergo it. On this of criticism, there were times that, for instance, when we were differing with President Zuma, the leadership of the ANC said, no, you are too angry. When they said I'm too angry, I said, okay, maybe it's time to go for criticism. I asked Comrade Gwede Mantashe to go and criticize me. I spent a long time and he said what he wanted to say. And I didn't have to respond to him. A few months ago, I underwent another period of criticism. This one took about 4.5 hours. I was criticized by Comrade George Mashamba a stalwart of the Communist Party. I had to visit him in Limpopo at his home. But he said, he will accept to criticize me if I bring Comrade Jenny Schreiner as a scribe of the criticism session. So indeed, Comrade Jenny, she's here, she's my witness. We went for criticism. I went for criticism, she was the scribe. So she has the record, I have the record. So I have to give him feedback at some point about what I'm doing about the things that he raised about me. So that this criticism is not a tick box exercise measure. I have done it, so it's done, that's it. No, it's a process of self-reflection. Now, part of the reason why he asked Comrade Jenny Schreiner to come, Comrade President, is because this comrade was mentioned by Agrizi at the Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture and corruption, what is normally called the Zondo Commission. Agrizi says they tried everything at correctional services to corrupt people in a systematic way. But he says to Justice Zondo, but my Lord, there was one person we could not crack, and that is Miss Jenny Schreiner. And you know, our cry from the commission is that when people were doing good, they don't praise them. She should have been in the final report as one of those who resisted systematic attack to corrupt them and their morality. She refused, she remained strong. And I'm happy that she's head of our secretariat in the Central Committee. Of course, comrades, let me touch lastly the international section as I close. This section deals with, in broad forms, I've not read every single thing, and even here, I'll just highlight. You will then read the political report as it is released. The part that we need to appreciate is the one we raise about the role of capital to remove our movement, including international capital. But equally, we are reaching a point in the world where there's a shifting balance of forces in the world. New geostrategic realignments, particularly because of the role of imperialism in trying to subjugate the countries that it does not agree with. And there are countries that are trying their best to remain independent. One of those is China and the Russian Federation and North Korea, Cuba, Iran, Syria under President Assad, which has just fallen just last week. And when it fell at a pace that shocked all of us. We did not anticipate that it will fall like that. We know that they were always been bombarded, the Syrians. Throughout, there was no time of cessation of hostilities, particularly from Israel and imperialist forces. But ultimately, they were destroyed, and a group of terrorists supported by the Western forces removed the government of President Assad. Again, we're asking ourselves this question after the removal of President Assad, that some Syrians, in the diaspora particularly, went into the streets to celebrate. This is a question that the liberation movement must reflect deeply, including when our electoral fortunes are declining. And in the SACP region in particular, we've been winning elections by small measures. You know, in Angola, we just crossed the 50% plus one. Here, we're at 53% at some point. We went down terribly. The neoliberals are contesting the outcomes of elections in Mozambique. Because the neoliberals do not want to accept the outcomes if it doesn't favor them. They have the resources to destabilize. Now, we are happy that comrades in SWAPO won the elections. Even there's a destabilization against SWAPO. In Zimbabwe, there have been similar things. So there's a threat to the national liberation movement. But on the continent, we have also seen some important developments. For instance, in the Central African region, we have seen Burkina Faso, Niger, Chad, Central African Republic, Mali, coming out of the cocoon, confronting French imperialism. Algeria itself asserting its independence. And actually, the Algerians have even set up a joint team, task team, with the French government at the level of universities to rewrite the distortion of their history by France, because they were treated over the years as one of the provinces of France. Now they've gone to that extent. So they are decolonizing themselves. And when this development in the Central African region, which was marked largely by military coup d'etats or takeovers, we in the Communist Party, on the basis of our assessment, we refuse to condemn them. And we're happy, President Mbeki, that we marked when you said, no, these are African patriots. It also strengthened our position, you know, because we were saying, but what is happening is important for the people in that region to decolonize themselves. So we need that particular process of decolonization in our own communities as well. So it is in this regard that what we are seeing today is the global crisis of capitalism and even the disintegrating leadership of the United States that has provided these imperialist forces across the world. And in this regard, Lenin had indicated that, yes, if you are to fight imperialism, for instance, in America, he makes specific mention of America. He said America is one of the foremost countries with regard to the debt and the abyss which lies between the handful of arrogant multimillionaires who wallow in filth and luxury and the millions of working people who constantly live on the verge of pauperism. And he says, despite its imperialist posture, even the working class are still attracted by the idea of the American dream. So imperialism can gloat itself as nice. But we are a revolutionary movement, we should see it. Today we can see many caravans of people, thousands of them, running away to America from their respective countries. They arrive there to be hobos, to be paupers, to live on the streets. But they are hobos, they say. I don't know what's the difference of a hobo in America and a hobo in Johannesburg. Because the conditions of life is what determines your well-being. Comrade Toilet was indicating here about the question of health in totality. So we have a situation where now the biggest crisis of the world capitalist system is exacerbated by these leading capitalist economies who are controlling massive wealth of the world. The US, for instance, has a budget of about 18 trillion US dollars. That's the domestic budget of the USA. It further has a deficit budget of 37 trillion trillion dollars. The African continent's GDP combined is not even 5 trillion US dollars. That's the huge disparities Just a couple of days ago, I was seeing that this chap, Elon Musk, was born here in South Africa, is now a US citizen, has reached the mark of $400 billion US worth as an individual. He's now richer than South African government. Yes, our GDP is about 350, 370 billion US dollars. He has reached 400 billion US dollars. I have said in one platform that that's going to be the first trillionaire in the world. That's the huge disparities in the world. All of these are driven by imperialism. We need just less than 5 trillion to end poverty in the whole world. Why these countries are sitting on massive resources when the people are dying of hunger across the world? This is because this rotten system of capitalism is not a system for humanity. It's a system for a minority few who use it to abuse the majority to live better, and the majority live in misery and in poverty. This is a fundamental struggle of communists, to make sure that everyone lives better. But we are doing so from the humbleness of our abilities in our own communities. But the war taking place in Europe at the moment, the biggest front is in Ukraine. That front in Ukraine, comrades, it's an anti-imperialist front. We have to understand it in that form. And the Russian Federation at the moment is fighting against the rest of Western Europe, or collective West. They are fighting one country. They want to finish it off. And in this regard, that struggle, it's an international struggle that we must join. Not on the side of war, on the side of peace against imperialism. And we have done some work in this regard as a Communist Party, including establishing the South African Peace Council, establishing the Africa Left Network Forum, so that the African progressive forces can come together and develop strategies on how to fight colonialism and imperialism in their respective countries. At the same time, comrades, the multipolar world system is emerging. And it is this system that the imperialist forces do not like, because they do not want to share political power and strategy. On the one hand, their system is disintegrating. The Middle East is one of those areas that is the major foot of imperialism. The destruction of Syria, it's a major setback in the struggle against imperialism. But we know that Syria will recover. The Syrian people will recover. They cannot continue under domination in which they cannot enjoy their freedoms. They have destroyed Palestine. They are still continuing to destroy Palestine through Israel. They are destroying Lebanon. Now, they've completely overrun Syria. In the Middle East, the bulwark that's standing now is Iran. Now, all the forces of imperialism will now be directed at Iran. May the people of Iran find strength to resist. They have our solidarity to resist this. We know that the next war will now be fully launched against Iran. And we've seen how they destroy these countries. You can see with Gaza. The National Chair was talking here about all of us experiencing genocide live. They do it every single day, and they record it. They even celebrate it. So we have to consider active participation in the international sphere to strengthen our comrades, particularly those in the building up of multipolar world system, including the role of South Africa in this regard as a state. And we are happy with the role that, for instance, the BRICS countries are beginning to do, including the BRICS countries playing a role as an anti-imperialist force and rebuilding new strength within the global south. All efforts must be made, comrades, to make sure that we don't go back to colonialism. And that is why we cannot accept this GNU notion that brings us back to colonialism. The African continent must continue to resist any imperialist forces, but must build its economies. We have the possibility to use the crisis of liberal democracy today, which is the crisis of modern capitalism. Liberalism, as it entered the world space, was an important ideology on the basis of its concept of liberty, freedoms, and human rights. But liberal democracy today, we have seen its offensive, particularly clothed in religious gowns. For instance, offensive as a religion used by liberal democracy to expand imperialism. You see, when you see Zionism in action, in Gaza, in Palestine, the rest of Palestine, especially in Gaza, driven by Israel, it has a religious gown in front. But who's the main backer of Israel? It's the United States of America, militarily and everything else. Everything that happens, the US send their warships right there outside the Mediterranean Sea. They are always there in the Pacific and everywhere else closer by. Tina, we only respond by statements. Now, this thing, comrades, have to change. We need governments, African governments, that are decisive, that have got guts. We don't need leaders who are cowards. And the crisis of liberal democracy, comrades, you will read it at length there in the report. This crisis has created new forms of brutality that we have seen across the world, including now recently in Syria. And here in South Africa, when this brutality takes place, the Jewish Board of Governors, the Jewish lobby, and Jewish aligned capital, in any case, dominant capital in the world is Jewish capital. In their alignment, they side with Israel. They condemn the world. They are now trying to finish off Russia, but it has stood up. And unfortunately, because of poor world leadership, we are almost on the crisis of a nuclear war. There's a possibility for that. Although we just got some assuring statement a couple of days ago when we were reading that after President Putin visited Belarus and met President Lukashenko, he intimated President that, well, they will be given the Owesome missiles to Belarusia. And the Owesome missiles are not the full-blown nuclear war, but they've got such capacity that they cannot be stopped. They are at a supersonic speed level, 8,500 kilometers per hour. That's nothing that you can prepare to stop it if they are dealing with you in Cape Town from here. So you divide the distance between here and Cape Town by 8,500 kilometers speed. So it's a massive speed. Now, we are only assured by that, even though this remains weapons of mass destruction. But at least with that, we realize at least the nuclear button can be saved at the moment. It can just be these missiles at the moment that perhaps some sense can reach into the head of leaders, particularly this poster boy of war called Zelensky. Arrogant chap. I don't understand what kind of leaders and how societies accept to have such kind of leaders. But nonetheless, this is the crisis of liberalism, and this crisis here represented by the DA should not be the people that we align ourselves with. We have indicated, comrade, that in terms of the GNU, this will take us back politically. The progressive agenda will ultimately get off the table. And this will create serious problem for us as a movement, as a liberation movement, particularly our relationship with the masses. We must also equally deal with matters in our society, in our communities that are afflicting us, the crisis of illegal mining in our communities, and we have said ultimately the government must come with mechanisms to have artisanal mining, but we must deal with illegal mining and create safe conditions. But say to capital, they must take responsibility. Those who are owning these mines, who made a whole lot of amount of money out of our minerals, they have not taken responsibility for the safety of our people after they've mined our minerals. So government must enforce these realities across the board. It is in this regard, comrade, that the Communist Party must be amongst the people when they fight against these struggles. And at the same time, we in the Communist Party must not allow ourselves to be appendages of other organizations in the struggles, including of some NGOs, some funded by imperialist forces that are running community struggles. How is it possible that only people who are running programs on the basis of being paid, they are in the leadership, and our comrades are not in the leadership with society? We must be there as comrades, as the structures of the movement. And therefore, in this regard, we must not allow a situation where we get compromise as the Communist Party by associating ourselves with programs that we do not understand, the programs that we do not even create or do not even discuss. It is in this regard that we should not allow even vulgarization of Marxism. Because there are those that, for instance, are vulgarizing Marxism in the context of these challenges that we face as a Communist Party. Some of them have been rudely awakened because they thought when we were criticizing this runaway elitist group in the ANC that has taken the movement right into the hands of reactionary forces and expect us to clap hands and be happy about it. They've soon realized that no, they were wrong to clap hands. We should not clap hands for wrong things. Let me leave you with this quote by Karl Marx, not by Lenin. He says, the working class cannot play its world revolutionary role unless it wages a ruthless struggle against the renegacy, spinelessness, subservience to opportunism, and unexampled vulgarization of the theories of Marxism. Some of our comrades, close quote, that's Lenin. Some of our comrades even try to use Marxism to justify why we should be in cohorts with the DA. When you start doing that, we must know you cannot be a Marxist. No, you cannot be a Marxist. But yes, you can read. You can be a Marxist without grasp of Marxism, the ideological soul of Marxism. We can articulate, you can say, yeah, you're a good reader. You can say Marx said this, Lenin said this, but not apply it to your own conditions. So that's where our comrades, our structures must focus on rebuilding ourselves. I want to close by saying, comrades, the time has come for us to fully strengthen ourselves and to fully understand the critical moment that we are in. The moment that is facing the working class of our country. We must seize this moment and refuse to capitulate to capitalist forces and their collaborators. This is not the time for half-hearted intentions and measures. It is a time to understand the situation correctly and act decisively. We must draw the red line and refuse any further betrayal. For us, it is socialism or barbarism. And therefore, we will not accept the barbarism of capitalism enforced on ourselves as a liberation movement, and we lose our soul. In this regard, we are wishing you well as you go in the terrain of our movement to campaign, as you strengthen our liberation movement by having an independent voice of the Communist Party in our communities. We want to wish you well and to wish this Special National Congress great success.